I want to walk through the mapping of the fretboard here, and I'm always pointing out that we should be looking for small reoccurring patterns, and that more often than not, if we feel sort of lost in what we're trying to see or play, that we're looking at too much real estate on the fretboard, say too many strings at once, too much, too many notes at once. Like if you're trying to practice 2 octaves of a scale, but really you just need what's going on the D and the G strings for that piece. You should just focus on the D and the G strings and not run all of the scale like that. So here I'm going to take this, I'm going to these fretboards, and I'm going to break them down to their double stop or 2-note reoccurring patterns. We're going to look for what's common and familiar to all of them. So let's take a look here. We've got a root and a third that are diagonal from each other in this G chord. Well, right here on the G and the B string, we have a root and a third that are parallel to each other. Let's scan our other chords. Root and third, little diagonal. Root and third, little diagonal. Root and third, straight line here. Root and third, diagonal. Go down to our E chord. Root and third, same diagonal. A chord, root and third, parallel. So what we see here is the only time a root and a third is next to each other is when the root is on the G string and the third is on the B string. So this is an example of using the fact that the G and B strings are tuned to a different interval than the others. What we'll learn to do is see this parallel relationship as a landmark as we move up the fretboard. So let's keep looking for what's common here. So we see our roots and thirds are diagonals except for when they're on the G and B string, and then they're parallel. Let's scan through here and look. Fifth and root, they're parallel. Fifth and root, fifth and root, fifth and root. Hey, here's our different one. So when the fifth is on the G string and the root is on the B string, you have a diagonal in this direction. Fifth and root, another parallel. Fifth and root, there's that reverse diagonal again. Fifth and a root parallel, fifth and a root parallel, fifth and a root parallel, and fifth and a root parallel. So we've just discovered that anytime you find the fifth, the root will be next to it on the adjacent string, unless the fifth is on the G string, and then the root will be this, what I refer to as a reverse diagonal. So fifth and reverse diagonal. Let's start over again. So we found our root and our third relationship, which was a diagonal unless it's on the G and B string, and then it's parallel. We found our fifth and root relationship, which is always parallel unless it's on the G and B string, then it's a reverse diagonal. Now let's look at our third and our fifth. We have long diagonal, we're skipping a fret, and we have straight line, 1, 2, 3, up 3 frets. Let's look for that. Here it is, third and fifth, up 3 frets. Third and fifth, long diagonal. Third and fifth, up 3 frets. Third and fifth, long diagonal. Long diagonal. Here's the difference. Third and fifth, short diagonal because of the G and B string. Long diagonal. Okay, so the third and the fifth is either on the same string, 1, 2, 3 frets apart, or adjacent strings, long diagonal, unless it's on the G and B string, and that's a short diagonal. So we've only got a few images here that we're thinking about, a few relationships. So let's take what we've learned and see if we can fill in the rest of this fingerboard. So root and third. Well, if this is true, third, 1, 2, 3, and I come up 3 frets, third, 1, 2, 3, then I should find, get my right icon here, I should go 1, 2, 3, and this should be a fifth. Hey, check it out, it is. If this is a fifth here, because this was true before, what would be right here? Well, If all the fifths and roots are next door neighbors like that, if I click here, I should get a root, and there it is. If this is a root and this root third relationship holds true, I'm going to click right here, and there it is. There's a third. So let's see if we can go back to this. See, here, keep going back over here. I'm going to try it again. We have a 5, 1, 3. Well, if this is a third, we should be able to come up 1, 2, 3 frets. 1, 2, 3 frets. And there it is. There's our fifth. If this is a fifth, and we're on the D string moving to G, there it is. There's our root. So here we are. Now we have a root on the G string. So what do we know about this? Root on the G string means that the third is not diagonal, but it's parallel. So just based on this little bit of information so far, we're able to start going in and filling out where all of our root triads are. And instead of taking the diagram that I have created already that has this filled in and trying to memorize it, which is still something you would want to do, instead of only doing that, what about taking these blank diagrams and going through and finding all of your triad locations? Let's try it right here for D. 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So there ought to be a fifth right there. And there it is. If there's a fifth here, we know it's on the other E string because it's the same note. So 3 and 5, 3 and 5. Well, we have a gap here. What would be here? 5, 1, 3. Check that out. So that's the next inversion of your D chord. Is it going to be true down here? Let's see. 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 5. There it is. If we know that this is a 1 or 5 here, and we know that this diagonal would be a 3, it should be there, and there it is. So if this is a fifth on the G string, there should be a root right here. And there it is. If this is a root, there should be a third here. If there's a third here, there should be a fifth here. Parallels or mirror image over to here. If that's a fifth, what should we find here? We should find a root. A root. Diagonal would be a third. And check it out. There's our next inversion of the E chord. Let's try it with our last chord here. So we have a root here, a fifth here. That tells us there should be a third right here. There it is. So if we have a third here, then what should we have down diagonal from it? Root, and there it is. Let's scan for what else we know. Oh, here's a third, so 1, 2, 3. Should be a fifth. There it is. There's a fifth. Next to it will be a root. There it is. There's our next inversion of the A chord. The reason I'm showing this as G, C, D, E, and A are not just because those are common keys that we play in, but those are also what people tend to refer to as the 5 repeating chord shapes, like the cage system, C, A, G, E, and D. However you approach this, I don't think about the cage system as far as the naming convention is concerned personally, but there's no denying that those 5 shapes keep reoccurring on the fretboard. So now that we've found 2 inversions of each one based on just that little bit of information, the relationship between root and third, relationship between fifth and root, and the relationship between third and fifth, let's see if we can go back here to G and fill out the rest of this fretboard based with that information. So let's scan for what we know. There's a root, there's a fifth, so that tells me that there's a third here. Sure enough. So this, let's see, we know root and third here, 1, 2, 3, there ought to be a fifth here. Fifth on the G string means that the diagonal and over, there should be a root. There it is. Diagonal and up, there should be a third. There it is. Straight up here should be a fifth. If it's here, then it's also here. If that fifth is here, there'd be a root right here. If this root is here, then there'd be a third right here. There it is. See what pattern we filled in? This is what people think of as like a C shape. So we have our G shape, We have the E shape here, the C shape. And if we keep going to the 12th fret, let's see what we find. Let's see, we'll start here. 3rd there, 2, 3. There's a 5th there. We're running out of fretboard. But we know it's going to mimic this because the 12th fret and the nut are the same. So 5th here, root there, 3rd there. And if we look at this, this is what people tend to call the A shape because we learn it in the open position. It's an A chord. So all I'm doing is using these like three or four reoccurring little relationships, or note relationships, to map out the fretboard and find my way around it. And what we're finding is we're getting these 5 shapes, the first 5 that we started with. We're going to get those over and over again, and always in the same order. If you can see that this is what we think of as a G shape, E will be after it, this D triangle will be there, the C chord shape will be here, and then the A chord shape. So if we apply that and say, like, well, let's see if that's really true. All right, we're looking at our C chord here. So this is your C shape. Here we've got this. Well, there's your A shape. If I have this diagonal shape, the next one in line should be this G chord, what we think of as the G shape. So I'm going to go build on that. 3 up to 5. 1, 2, 3. There's a 5th. Next to it would be a root. If there's a root here, then there's a root here. If the root is here, there's a diagonal 3rd. And check it out. We've built our what's referred to as a G shape. Now, I don't get too hung up in the fact that these are, that these bigger shapes are there, and I don't think of them as G shape or C shape too much. I mean, I acknowledge that that's there, and that is truthful information. But when you're playing on the fretboard, and go back to this notion of, like, you only need to be focusing on a small amount of fretboard at a time, a triad or 2 or 3 notes or just a few strings, in order to find your bearings. And we're talking about knowing where you are on the fretboard, not necessarily playing every note in the song or in the idea, but being able to know the landscape and know where you are on the fretboard. And that's going to, looking at these small relationships, is going to build that. So let's finish out this fretboard. 1, 3, 5, 5, 1, 1, 3. And now we've completed this E shape. We come up here, 1, 3, 5. There would be a root here if I had another fret. So imagine that the root popped up right there. That's this guy. So that tells me that there'd be a 3rd here, 3rd over here. And this would be the D shape if we had more frets to show up. Let's try it again. So I'm going to just work through these other 3 without saying a whole lot. 1, 3, 5. 5 to root. Root to 3rd. Oops, sorry. Root to 3rd. Missed my mouse there. 3rd up to 5th. Alright. If this is a 5, then we know there's a 3 here. There'd be a diagonal 1 there. 3 up to 5 here. 5 to 1. There's our G shape. 3 to 5. 5 to 1. 1 to 3, diagonal. Completes the E shape. So now we have our E fretboard. I'm sorry, your D fretboard, and that's the E shape. Down here we have our E shape. So pick up here, 3 to 5. 5 to 1. 1 to 3, diagonal up, diagonal down here would be a 3rd, next to that would be, diagonal would be a root, 3 to 5 here, 5 to 1, and we've completed that fretboard. Let's try it here, 3 to 5, 5 to 1, 1 to 3, and then 3 to 5 completes that. There's your E shape. Let's build up this way, 3 to 5. Alright, so 5 to 1 would be reverse diagonal because it's on the G. And then diagonal. 3 there means that there's a 3 here. We've got this D shape happening there. If we 5th is here, diagonal over. We use, and then diagonal down would be 1. Next door would be 5. There's a 5 here, there's a 5 there. So that's all 5 patterns that we find for the major chord on the fretboard. And and we find that they occur those 5 patterns occur in the same order. Think of it as a conveyor belt. And if you can use these small little parallel notes, diagonal notes as cues to know that you're in the right place at the right time, this is ultimately then applying to this notion of the fence post melody. And if you're seeing the melody in very core, singular sort of notes or notes from the triad, and you know you're mapping like this, you're going to be able to move your ideas around quicker and more freely, and then get more out of your knowledge. So try this on your own. Practice this. The more you practice filling out this chart, the faster you'll be able to think through all of this. It's not only about playing it on your instrument, but it's also about filling out the charts and practicing pattern recognition.